trust the way. Trust the way. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? So, I like to look at this entire experience, right? Everything that's happening right now, like birth to death, soup to nuts, the whole thing, as being in a canoe going downriver. Going downriver. The vast majority, if you've ever done it, going down a fast river in a canoe, the vast majority of what's happening is out of your control. You can't just turn around. You can't just stop. When the river turns left, so do you. When the river goes calm, you have that experience. When the river is rapid and life-threateningly dangerous, suddenly you have that experience. You don't get to make those choices. But you do have a paddle. And if you've practiced with it at all, you do have some measure of control. Sometimes a little bit. When the river is very rapid, you have very little control. If you're lucky and see it 100 yards away, you might be able to avoid that rock. And when the river is calm, you have a step more control. You can decide, like, oh, the river's calm. I'm going to go hang out on the east bank right now. Oh, the river is calm. I'm going to go hang out in the shade of the west bank right now. It's afternoon, and the trees are shading this side of the river. Right? And so I like to look at everything that way. Right? Mostly, what I feel like I'm doing with my life is just hanging on. It's just hanging on. And sometimes I get to make big decisions, but rarely. Most of the time I'm just hanging on, trying to stay out of trouble. Trying to stay oriented in the right direction. And all the details in the middle I have very little control over. I have very little control over. I've had a lot of careers in my life, and it's funny to say I don't really feel like I've chosen any of them. It looked maybe from the outside like I did, but there were a lot of forces internally and externally that were directing me here, pushing me that way, and tipping me that way. A friend, a positive experience, a negative experience, an opportunity, a closed door. And all I've been doing is just keep my paddle in the water. And when I had the opportunity, making big moves. And when I didn't, making little ones, trying to stay afloat. And I think that 80, 90, sometimes 100% of our suffering is coming from a resistance to that truth. Because that's not exactly the most flattering or appealing or inviting way to look at life. It would be really nice to imagine life as like a freeway. Right? And I'm in the car and I have all this control. Anytime I want, I can slam on the brakes. Anytime I want, I can boom, just pull off this exit, take a break, do a U-turn. It would be really nice to imagine that there's a part of my mind that's kind of like a CEO in charge, and that has a 360-degree view, and that is always rational, right, and not subject to the warp and woof of my animal, hormonal, emotional self. But that has not been my experience. That's not what this life has felt like to me. And the more closely I examine it, the more closely I believe this to be true. And so rather than putting all of this energy, wasting all of this energy, right? My real energy, my life energy, call it chi, call it the force, call it the way, call it one's animus, my life. Like rather than wasting that, wishing that I was in a car when I'm in a canoe, right? And causing myself all that disappointment, all that dissatisfaction, right? All that frustration, all that sadness, sometimes even despair, that level of powerlessness, if I'm fighting it. will bring me to despair. They'll make me want to get out of the canoe. Right? It'll make me want to die. Rather than doing that, I would rather trust the way. And I would rather just acknowledge, as painful as it can be at times, like, hey, this is it. Like right now, I'm in the rapids, and all I can do is tighten the strap on my helmet and keep my paddle in the water and do the best that I can. And I know, right? There's no such thing as a river that's all rapids, just like there's no such thing as a river that's all calm. I know that this will end. Tomorrow's a new day. Next year is a new year. Things come in cycles. What goes up must come down, and on and on. I know this. I know that everything is impermanent. I know that the only thing I can count on is change. And so rather than doing all that resisting, all that fruitless, frustrated wishing for other, wishing that this moment was something other than it is, which, by the way, is my favorite definition of stress. Wishing that this moment was different than it is. Rather than all that, I can just trust the way. Like, oh man. There's an old expression that I really love. It's kind of a joke about what somebody could say to a boss that was threatening to fire them. The person could respond, well, I was looking for a job when I found this one. You know, like there's a darkness to that, right? You could say that's cynical, but I also love the truth in it. Right? There's a real truth in it. That if I trust the way, come on, like I made it through every day before this one. Right? Or I wouldn't be standing here now suffering or rejoicing, depending. You know, the friend that I was visiting with today, one day I told him like all these troubles I was having. We've been friends for many, many years, practitioners as well. And I was just, I was in it. You know, I was in the rapids, out of the boat, you know, life best off, like drowning at this point in my life. And I just described it to him and I was like, oh, I got this going on, and I got this going on, and I got this going on, and this is terrible, and this is frightening, and this is overwhelming, and this is more than I can handle. And he listened, and at the end, and I said, but, you know, because I knew who I was talking to. I was like, but, like, I think it's going to work itself out. And he laughed. And he said, Dave, what else could ever happen? That's what always happens. Everything works itself out. It's just a matter of how. It's just a matter of how. And so by saying trust the way, what I'm trying to remind myself to do, what I'm inviting you to do with the practice of that gata, is to trust in that. Is to trust in that. Right? Not in some Pollyanna-ish kind of pie in the sky way, like, you know, that I can law of attraction everything I want, you know, into an Amazon box on my front stoop, because I don't think that's the case. That has not been my experience. But in a deeper sense, like, oh, well, I knew bad stuff was coming. You know, like, I am of a nature to grow old, to get sick, and to die, as the 5 remembrances, right? The Buddhist version of Memento Mori remind me. And so, you know, does it make sense now to be surprised? Does it make sense now to tell myself the story that, like, this shouldn't be happening? And why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? I don't deserve this. Right? That's all the opposite of trusting the way. And so instead, right, I could say, whew, this is hard. You know? Let's see what energy I have inside of this. Let's see what little bit I can actually control right now in the middle of this storm. And just focusing my attention there. That's going to produce some effect. That's going to help. That's going to make it so that that bit of rapids, that section of difficulty, is suffered well. It's still suffering. But if I suffer well, then I can learn every time. I can get a little bit better with my paddle. I can get a little bit better at reading the river. I can get a little bit calmer when things start to get sketch. And on and on. And so then the next time, it's not so bad. It's not so scary. It's not so dangerous. It's not so impactful. But in order to do that, I have to be trusting. Right? In order to have the space to focus on what I can change, the tiny bit I can control, I have to trust that that's enough. I have to trust that that's enough. And as is always the case in our practice, the last thing I'm doing is asking you to believe that or to trust that just because I said it. That is not the way. That is not our practice. There is no leap of faith or blind faith in Buddhism. Our teacher, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, defines faith this way, and I quote, "Faith is a confidence born from observing the fruits of my practice." I'll say that again. Faith is a confidence born from observing the fruits of my practice. And so what I'm saying is that exactly. Like, try trusting the way. Try injecting maximum fun into a moment's positive, negative, and neutral. Try combining both of those things at the same time. Trusting the way and leaning into maximum fun. Meaning really showing up for and being grateful for even the neutral moments, even the negative moments. Try it and see what fruit that practice bears for you. If it improves things, well, then you will on your own develop a confidence in those practices. And the next time you have an opportunity to practice them, you will have the faith to do so. Right? You see, there's no leaping there. There's no blindness. It's very cut and dry.